Hi, I'm Abdul Saad, clinical psychologist at Vital Mind Psychology here in Sydney, Australia. And I come to you today with a new video in this series that is aimed at assisting empaths to gain a deeper understanding of themselves. In last week's video, I discussed what I call the anatomy of an empath. So looking beneath the surface of the empath to look at what are the core psychological traits, mechanisms, variables, and drivers which, when put together, appear to make up the empath temperament and the empath personality in my clinical experience over the years. And I'm pleased with the feedback I've got in the comments section that for the vast majority of people, they strongly related to these three aspects as being core features of the empath self. What I want to do today is briefly discuss how these three features, these three mechanisms, these three aspects, number one, can become hijacked, can become dysregulated in a dysfunctional relationship, for example, with a narcissist. And I want to also spend some time within that context looking at how, essentially, what is the dark side of these three aspects when they're dysregulated, when they're out of alignment, when they're not working as they should be. What begins to manifest in the empath's psychology, in their physiology, in their relationships. So if we look at the hyperactivated attachment system, and I suggest if you're starting off with this video to watch the video on the three core features of an empath, or the anatomy of the empath video from last week. But the hyperactivated attachment system in a dysfunctional relationship means that, for example, with the narcissist, means that the empath feels intense closeness, intense chemistry, and intense fascination with the narcissist at the beginning of the relationship. And when this attachment system has become hyperactive, the empath begins to, I guess, override their more rational cognitive faculties. And this is one of the things that empaths often tell me when we look at their relationships with narcissists, is that they'll say when we dig deep that they knew all along that things were too good to be true. They knew all along that there was this strong element of flattery. But that internal knowing couldn't really be used, or wasn't fully accessed by them. And I think it's due to this hyperactivation of the attachment system, which at a neurobiological level, neurochemical level, causes a surge in hormones and neurochemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, these feel-good brain chemicals, which can really decenter a person in their ability to be grounded in their own authority. Now, in the relationship with the narcissist, not only is there a hyperactivated attachment system, but all of these three systems come online very strongly. So the need to please, the need to be agreeable, the fear of upsetting the other person, the fear of, how am I coming across? There's a lot of self-monitoring, which also leads to a strong triggering of the internal critic, or the internal judge, or psychological judge. And if you think about it, if you're in a relationship where all three systems are maximally turned on, the attachment system will give you feelings of exhilaration initially, feelings of a rush, of a high, which is what makes relationships with narcissists, for many empaths, in reality quite addictive. There is a compulsion to seek out these people because in a way the narcissist pushes the empath's buttons. Okay, it maximally activates their attachment system compared to other personalities. The need to please places the empath on this sort of high alert mode to the needs of the other person. So the excessive giving, the excessive focus on their gestures, on their emotions, on how they're coming across. And of course, the narcissistic personality will use this to their advantage to trigger feelings of guilt, to gaslight, to make the empath doubt their reality. And the strong internal critic, if it's also activated, means that the internal critic is maximally focused upon the empath. And of course, a narcissistic personality disordered individual will, in a way, get the internal critic of the empath to be really focused upon the empath through comments, through suggestions, through slight comments they may drop, which makes the empath perhaps feel guilt or make them second guess themselves, make them doubt themselves, even if they initially knew that they were in the right when they raised the matter. The combination of the hyperactivated attachment system, the feeling of connection with the narcissistic individual, the strong need to please, the trait of agreeableness, and the strong internal critic, really, if we put these three together that are maximally turned on, the empath loses their groundedness, loses their center, loses their seat of authority. Now, these three systems being turned on to full blast, as we could say, this is unsustainable, psychologically unsustainable as well as physiologically unsustainable, because the amount of resources that has to go in to keep this going eventually leads the empath to hit a brick wall. And when that happens, when the empath starts to hit that brick wall, and it can start off in a very subtle way, the empath may start to feel unwell, they may start to develop all sorts of physical symptoms, they might start to have a lot of self-doubt. What begins to happen is we begin to see, in a way, the dark side of these three things, which go up to make the empath. So for the hyperactivated attachment system, the empath's investment in the other person, the empath's giving and their need to please, and the empath's strong internal critic against themselves all become, in a way, distorted. So the hyperactivated attachment system and need to please, these two things together, lead the empath to begin to feel extreme feelings of resentment, of cynicism, of hostility, as they begin to become aware of how their attachment system has been hijacked, how they have been lied to, how they have consistently denied their own needs. And what begins to happen is the strong internal critic, which was directed solely at the empath, is now directed toward other parties. And it may be the narcissistic individual, but also other people in the lives of the empath. So the empath here can become extremely critical and judgmental of others, as that strong internal critic is now aimed outwardly for the empath, often destroying a lot of their relationships, creating deep rifts even with their support base, with their support team. Now, their need to please, when the empath is really in trouble and has exhausted their capacity to adapt, that actually becomes its opposite, which the empath goes from being highly agreeable to highly disagreeable. And in this case, an empath in trouble can actually become quite tyrannical to people who they judge to be lower in the dominance hierarchy. They may act with high levels of displaced aggression toward others. They may seek retribution, become highly resentful. And I'm not talking here solely toward the narcissist, but even other people in their lives who they now feel have let them down. The hyperactivated attachment system, that's not sustainable, because the resources involved in that means the empath will quickly burn out. So what happens is the empath goes from a hyperactivated attachment system to the attachment system becomes shut down, and the empath begins to have great difficulty feeling any sort of closeness to others. And one of the mistakes empaths tend to make when they're in this burnt out state is they seek to surround themselves with people who confirm their distorted view of the world, and often will alienate people who can actually give the empath a reality check. So the empath begins to view those people as well who are actually in their support base as being against them. And the empath in this state is becoming highly isolated, resentful, and cynical. Now, what I want to do in, just looking at the time, what I want to do in the next video is I want to continue exploring some of the continue to give you some of the insights into the empath personality, and I'm thinking of looking at some of the core or key mistakes empaths make when they have reached this point, when these three systems have been maximally exhausted and the empath is in this burnt out phase. What are the core beliefs that start to solidify? What are the core perspectives the empath begins to take that paradoxically, while on the surface seeking to maybe empowering them, like I'm more aware of narcissists now, I'm more aware of predatory personalities, at a deeper level actually creates handicaps for the empath, because they begin to operate and view the world in quite a stereotyped black and white way. Partly as a defense mechanism, as a survival mechanism, because the empath realizes that I can never really allow myself to go back to this. Okay, and often an empath will have to go through this cycle of having all these systems dysregulated and burnt out multiple times until there's actually not enough energy anymore for any of these systems to operate in any functional way. So in a very burnt out empath, they've got an incapacity to attach, they've got an incapacity to feel warmth, they've got an incapacity to feel connection to others. They become highly disagreeable, they become highly misanthropic, and the internal critic, which for years and decades they have directed toward themselves, is now directed toward others, and they're willing to bite anyone's head off that dares to get in their way. And this is really the signals of an empath that is in trouble. So we shall continue, God willing, next week. I want to thank you for your support of the channel. Please press like if you find the videos helpful. Subscribe. I know I've learned recently that if you press like on the videos, it helps Google or YouTube rank the videos when people go searching for these topics. So appreciate if you can press like, share the videos, and also check me out on Facebook at Vital Mind Psychology. I look forward to seeing you next week. God willing, take care. Bye-bye.